This is Kol Birama, the podcast of Congregation Ramat Raz 929 Tanakh Project. Join us each day as we study a chapter of Tanakh, building towards completing all 929 together. I'm Rabbi Yoni Zolti, and I'm glad you're here. Bereishit chapter 8. The world has become corrupted. Humanity and animals alike defiled God's creation. God therefore declares that he regrets having created the world and resolves instead to destroy it through a flood. Yet, afterwards, the world is reborn. Humanity and beasts emerge from the ark, ready to repopulate the earth. And God promises never again to destroy the world. Lo osif lakot od et kolchai kasher asiti. Yet, simultaneously, in the very same breath, God declares that human nature remains fundamentally unchanged. Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra min ne'urav. The inclination of man's heart is evil from his youth. So what just happened? Why destroy a world only to then recreate a seemingly identical one? To what end? What changed? Why will this iteration be any different? Over the next 3 chapters, I want to focus on this question, as I believe it holds the key to understanding not only the flood narrative, but also the broader arc of biblical history and the role of humankind in God's world. For today, I want to focus on the most prominent difference between the first and second world, namely, humanity's newfound permission to consume animals. While Adam was prohibited from eating animals, Noah receives permission to consume them. However, Noah, at the same time, is given 2 crucial caveats. First, ach basar benafsho damo lo tochelu. Even while you can eat animals, you can only eat its flesh. You may not eat its life force, its blood. Their spirit, represented by the blood, may not be eaten. Second, although killing animals is permitted, killing fellow humans remains prohibited. Nevertheless, this is a big change. Noah and humans are now allowed to eat animals. Why? What changed? Some suggest that the difference is that now that Noah has saved them, Noah, in effect, has earned the right to the animals. They exist only because of his intervention, and so rightfully they belong to him to do with them as he pleases. This reasoning, though, has always struck me as somewhat backwards. Noah's role aboard the ark was fundamentally that of a protector. He was their guardian, he provided for them, he fed them. Certainly, it's true, the animals owe their lives to him, but why should that all of a sudden mean that his relationship should be transformed from protector to predator? Shouldn't his responsibility remain something more protective? Think of it in this way. Parents provide for and nurture their helpless children. And while it's certainly true that a child owes its life to its parents, we wouldn't then say that that debt is a justification for the parents to then eat their child. That's perverse. Others suggest a different explanation. Perhaps now, after the flood, humanity has reached some type of new existential height. Whereas previously humans existed on a plane similar to animals, they were both created on the 6th day of creation, they were kind of equals. Now humans have transcended and surpassed the animals, and therefore they can partake of the animals as they are no longer equal fellow creatures. But that explanation doesn't really hold water. How can humanity be considered to be elevated to a higher spiritual plane post-deluge compared to before? Didn't God explicitly decree that humanity should be preserved despite being evil? Ki yetzer lev hadam ra min ne'urav? How can you suggest that they, in some ways, have reached a higher spiritual plane? In fact, in the original creation, humanity was granted explicit dominion over the animal kingdom. God commands the first people, Urdu v'gat hayam u'ov hashamayim chol chaya harumeset al haaretz, to rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and every living thing that moves upon the earth. The word redu suggests some type of royal authority. It's often used in Tanakh in context of kings ruling over their subjects. The point being that humanity was to govern the natural world as kings, exercising benevolent sovereignty over creation. Not just stewardship, but actual rulership, because they were God's representatives on earth. And here's the rub. After the flood, humanity has lost that royal mandate. Instead of ruling through divine authority and natural harmony, humans are told that morachem v'chitchem you, your fear and your dread will be upon the animals. Any control they have is solely based on intimidation, on fear. Instead of having this natural hierarchy of being a natural king, they now have this sense of being almost forced submission. Previously, humans and animals would coexist harmoniously based on mutual respect, a divinely ordained order. But now, humans actually require God's protection from the animals through the gift of fear. The relationship has devolved from one of benevolent governance to one of mutual wariness. There is a real sense that humanity has fallen from its pedestal. Whereas before, humans served as perhaps the zookeepers, watching over animals from the outside, benevolent rulers following God's directive. They have now lost that responsibility, and instead they have now, in effect, entered the cage and are living alongside the animals as equals. The crown of dominion has been removed, and in its place humanity must rely on the crude mechanism of intimidation to survive amongst the very creatures they once ruled with divine authority. Perhaps the most telling evidence of this diminished status lies in the concept of tzelem elokim, the divine image in which humans are created. In the first creation, the text declares that God creates man b'tzelmo, b'tzelem elokim bara'oto, in the image of God. And this image represents humanity's elevated status, their special role as God's representatives on earth. After the flood, reference to tzelem elokim reappears, but not as a crown of distinction, but actually as a form of protection. Shofech dam adam ba'adam damo yishafech ki b'tzelem elokim asat ha'adam. You're not allowed to murder other people because human beings, have been created in the image of God. The divine spark is not a badge of honor, but it's a saving grace. It's the one thing preventing them from being murdered. Instead of elevating humanity above creation, tzelem elokim now serves as a protective barrier that shields them from violence. So, humanity, if anything, has been brought down from its pedestal. Why? Because the fundamental problem with the first world was that humanity was given excessive responsibility. As God's emissaries on earth, they were meant to govern the world as God does. But, as we've seen, they proved sorely inadequate to this awesome task. And so God recreates the world. And in World 2.0, humanity has lost this responsibility. They no longer serve as benevolent rulers or zookeepers for creation. And therefore, if they sin, or when they sin, the ramifications are less severe. The failures they have reflect only upon themselves, no longer on creation as a whole. At the same time, though, it actually creates a new opportunity. Because humanity no longer bears the responsibility of rulership by default, it means that if they choose to rise to the challenge, then they have the ability to do so. The structure almost encourages this voluntary stewardship that humans can choose to embrace. Consider, in this regard, the remarkable difference between Adam and Noah. Adam was largely a passive recipient of all of God's creation. The garden was planted for him, he's placed in the garden, the animals were created for him and brought to him, even his companion was created while he slept. His only responsibility was just to maintain the garden, not to create the garden. Noah, by contrast, becomes an active co-creator. He builds the ark that will preserve all future life. He determines when it's safe to leave by sending out the birds. He offers sacrifices that prompt God's promise never again to destroy the world. And most tellingly, he plants a vineyard, recreating in essence a new garden for this new world. This is a form of partnership. It's an opportunity, but it is not an obligation. Humanity has lost its inherited status, but through careful collaboration with the world's creator, by taking initiative and responsibility, it has the pathway to earn and maybe even exceed its former elevation. The crown is no longer automatically bestowed, but it remains achievable for those willing to reach for it through righteous action and divine partnership. This explains why God simultaneously promised never to destroy the world again, while at the same time acknowledging that human nature remains unchanged. The world's fate is no longer contingent upon humanity's moral perfection, but at the same time, humanity is also not condemned to mediocrity. It creates a space for gradual moral development, for voluntary righteousness, and for the possibility that individuals might choose to rise above their base nature, not because they must, but because they can. Thank you for joining today's learning. See you tomorrow for the next chapter of Tanakh.